All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about a story that, honestly, you've probably heard of. It's one of the most famous, most dramatic, and now one of the most controversial studies in the history of psychology. Yep, the Stanford Prison Experiment. It's this huge story that basically shaped how we think about human nature. But, as we're about to find out, the story we all know might not be the real story at all.
And right off the bat, we've got this bombshell. This is a quote from the man who ran the whole show, Dr. Philip Zimbardo himself. "There's no question that I allowed evil to take place." I mean, wow. That single sentence is just so chilling, and it really cuts right to the heart of the massive ethical storm that's been swirling around this experiment for like decades.
So, before we get into all the controversy, what's the story that's been told in, every Psych 101 textbook for the last 50 years? Let's do a quick recap of the legend, what we think happened in that basement at Stanford back in the summer of '71.
Okay, so this is the core idea Zimbardo wanted to test. He called it the Lucifer effect. And the question is really simple, but it's also profound. Are some people just born evil? The classic bad apples theory. Or can a really bad situation, a bad barrel, take perfectly normal, good people and turn them into something awful?
And things went downhill fast. I mean, unbelievably fast. On day one, it's basically students playing dress-up. You've got these mock arrests, guys in uniforms, but by day two, just 24 hours later, there's a full-on rebellion. The prisoners barricade themselves in, and the guards retaliate with fire extinguishers and mind games. It just kept escalating, until by day 6, they had to pull the plug on the whole thing. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks. It got that toxic, that abusive, that quickly. The transformation was just terrifying.
And this quote, this one really gets under your skin. It's from the guard they nicknamed John Wayne, and he was the one who got, let's say, the most creative with his cruelty. We were the puppeteers, and they were our puppets. I mean, listen to that. It just perfectly captures the sick mindset that started to take over. It's this chilling confession about the absolute power they felt, and worse, how some of them really, really started to enjoy.
So all of this led to the classic takeaway, right? The big conclusion that made this whole thing so famous. It's all about the power of the situation. It wasn't the people, it was the place. Let's break that down.
So here's the accepted conclusion, the one that got written into history. You take ordinary, healthy students, give them roles, and bam. The guards turn sadistic, the prisoners become these passive, broken shells of themselves. The takeaway? It's not about their personality, it's all about the situation. The experiment proved that literally anyone, you, me, anyone, is capable of evil if the circumstances are right. The bad barrel corrupts the good apples. But what if that whole story isn't true?
Because in the last few years, things have really started to unravel. New evidence has come out, and it is explosive. We're talking people calling the entire experiment a sham, a lie. Some even say it's a flat-out fraud. I mean, think about that. This is a complete takedown of one of the most foundational stories in all of psychology.
Okay, so let's start looking at the cracks in the story. Because, if this classic narrative is wrong, then everything we thought we learned from this thing, it all gets thrown into question.
And this is a big one. This quote comes from an audio recording that was dug up recently, and it's basically a smoking gun. You can literally hear one of Zimbardo's researchers coaching a guard, telling him, "Hey, you're being a little too soft. We need you to be what we call a tough guard." He's explicitly telling him how to act.
So you have to ask yourself, was this cruelty really spontaneous? Did it just bubble up out of the situation? Or was it encouraged? Were these guys just following orders? In psychology, there's a term for this. It's called demand characteristics. It's when people in a study figure out what the researchers want to see and they act that way. It means the behavior wasn't natural at all. It was a performance.
And then there's this. Think about how they got the participants in the first place. The newspaper ad was for a study of prison life. Now, hang on a second. What kind of person do you think answers an ad like that? Later studies have actually shown that an ad with those specific words tends to attract people who are already a bit more aggressive, a bit more authoritarian. So, were these really just ordinary good apples from the start?
But maybe the biggest problem wasn't even the guards or the prisoners. Maybe the biggest problem of all was the experimenter himself. Let's talk about Zimbardo. See, Zimbardo made a critical mistake. He wasn't just the objective researcher watching from a distance. No, he cast himself in the experiment as the prison superintendent. And that's a huge conflict of interest, right? A researcher is supposed to be impartial, just collecting data. But a prison superintendent? His job is to maintain order to protect his prison. He was no longer just observing the experiment, he was directing it, actively influencing the outcome.
So if Zimbardo himself was lost in his own role, who is the one to finally say stop? Well, her name was Christina Maslach, and she's kind of the hero of this story. She was a psychologist, and she was also dating Zimbardo at the time. He brought her in to do some interviews, and as an outsider, her reaction was just immediate. She was horrified. She saw what was happening and basically said, "This is terrible." And get this, over 50 people, 50, had seen the experiment. Researchers, assistants, they even brought in a priest at one point. And yet, Christina Maslach was the only one who stood up and challenged Zimbardo directly. The only one who said, "What you are doing to these boys is wrong." She was the one who finally broke the spell.
So, okay, we've got coached guards, biased participants, a compromised researcher. The whole thing is deeply, deeply flawed. Which brings up a huge question. Why is this still one of the most famous studies ever? Why do we keep telling this story?
Well, one reason is that the story has kind of taken on a life of its own. The controversy itself is now part of the legend. As this quote puts it, it's a fierce, fascinating fight. It's become this epic battle over a scientific narrative, a place where sticking to your side of the story can feel more important than sticking to the facts.
And you can't deny the story's legacy. It's immense. It gave us this really simple, really powerful explanation for evil, the bad barrel theory. And people immediately started using it to explain real-world events, like major prison riots that were happening at the same time. Fast forward decades, and Zimbardo himself is testifying before Congress about the Abu Ghraib prison scandal, saying, "See, this is my experiment playing out for real." It became the go-to explanation. Blame the system, not just a few bad soldiers.
But you know, maybe the most real, the most undeniable lesson from all this comes from Christina Maslach again. She pointed out that the real story isn't just about the one super cruel guard, John Wayne. The real story is about all the other guards, the so-called good ones, who just stood by and let it happen. They did nothing. And that is a lesson about the power of inaction that is deeply and, frankly, uncomfortably relatable for all of us.
And so, that's where we're left. The Stanford Prison Experiment tells a really compelling, almost neat story that seems to explain some of the darkest parts of human behavior. It's an incredibly powerful narrative. But now, with all this evidence piling up against it, we have to ask a really tough question. When a story feels so right, when it seems to explain so much, does the truth still matter?